When scientists studied Filipino DNA, they expected to find Asian roots, links to China, Taiwan, and the Pacific. But what they discovered shocked them: traces of African ancestry hidden deep inside the Filipino genome. How did African DNA travel thousands of miles into the Philippines? The answer may rewrite everything we thought we knew about migration. When we talk about Filipino ancestry, most people imagine Asia. And it makes sense. Geographically, the Philippines sits in Southeast Asia, surrounded by neighbors like Malaysia, Indonesia, and China. Linguists connect the Filipino languages to Austronesian, a family that stretches across the Pacific. But genetics tells a more complicated story. Because when scientists began sequencing Filipino DNA, they found a surprising element that didn't fit the expected pattern: traces of African ancestry. This discovery raised big questions. When and how did African genes enter the Philippines? Was it recent, ancient, and what does it mean for our understanding of Filipino identity? To answer this, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning of human history. All modern humans trace their origins to Africa. Around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens left Africa and began migrating across the world. Some groups went north into Europe, others moved east, across the Middle East into Asia. Over tens of thousands of years, these groups spread into India, China, Southeast Asia, and eventually the Pacific. The Philippines, sitting at the center of maritime crossroads, became one of the stopover points for these migrations. So in one sense, all Filipinos, like all humans, carry ancient African roots. But the genetic evidence in the Philippines points to something even more specific: traces of direct African ancestry that survived more strongly here than in other parts of Asia. One of the clearest examples comes from the Ita, an indigenous group in Luzon, along with other Negrito populations across the Philippines. Genetic studies show that Negrito groups in the Philippines have some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA in the world, Denisovans being an extinct human species that interbred with modern humans in Asia. But alongside that, these groups also carry unique markers linking back to ancient African lineages. This has led scientists to suggest that Negritos represent some of the earliest inhabitants of Southeast Asia, arriving tens of thousands of years before later Austronesian migrations. Their African-linked DNA is a living echo of those first journeys out of Africa. This means that while much of Filipino culture today comes from Austronesian roots, language, seafaring, farming, some of the bloodlines go back far deeper, connecting Filipinos to the earliest waves of human migration out of Africa. But here's where it gets more intriguing. Genetic analyses don't only find African traces in Negrito groups. Smaller percentages show up in wider Filipino populations as well. How did that happen? Well, there are a few theories. First, there's ancient mixing. As Negrito groups interacted with later Austronesian migrants, their African-linked DNA spread into the broader population. Over thousands of years, even small percentages carried forward. Another idea is trade routes. Long before Europeans, the Philippines was part of global trade networks. Arab, Indian, and even African traders reached Southeast Asia. Some intermarriage may have introduced additional African ancestry into Filipino lineages. And finally, shared origins. Some genetic links may not come from recent African arrivals, but from very ancient populations that carried similar markers when they spread across Asia. Whichever the case, the result is the same. Filipino DNA holds an African connection that most people don't know about. One possible explanation lies in the Indian Ocean trade network, which thrived centuries before colonization. Ships sailed between East Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia, carrying spices, textiles, and even people. Historical records show that African sailors and traders reached India, and some continued eastward. Through this network, it's entirely possible that African genes entered the Philippines not just tens of thousands of years ago, but also within the last millennium. Archaeological evidence supports this. In Butuan and other ancient Philippine ports, artifacts from faraway lands, including India and Arabia, have been found. If goods could travel that far, so could people. And when people traveled, they brought their families, their traditions, and yes, their DNA. What makes this discovery so powerful is that it shows the Philippines has never been isolated. From the very beginning, it was part of a global human journey. Filipino DNA is, like a tapestry. You can trace threads to Taiwan and Australasia, linking Filipinos to Polynesians, Hawaiians, and Maori. You can trace other threads to China and South Asia, showing centuries of trade and intermarriage. And deep within, you find threads that go all the way back to Africa, the birthplace of humanity. It means that being Filipino is not just about being Asian or Austronesian, it's really about being part of the bigger human story that connects continents and oceans. For many Filipinos, learning about African DNA is a source of pride, not confusion. It proves that Filipino identity is not small, not narrow. It's vast. It spans thousands of years and thousands of miles. It also challenges the colonial narrative. For centuries, outsiders painted the Philippines as a land discovered by Europeans, as if nothing important existed before. But DNA says otherwise. The Philippines was already connected to humanity's earliest migrations, already part of global exchanges long before colonizers arrived. This African connection is a reminder. Filipinos have always been citizens of the world. Researchers have mapped Filipino genomes and compared them to global databases. What they found is clear certain Filipino populations carry genetic markers that link directly to ancient African lineages. These markers are rare in most of Asia but appear at measurable levels in the Philippines. The strongest concentrations are among Negrito groups, but traces also appear in mixed populations across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. This means the African DNA is not a myth or exaggeration, it's a scientific reality. The most moving part of this discovery is that you can still see living traces of it today. The curly hair, darker skin tones, and unique features of Negrito groups are not signs of foreignness, but living links to humanity's oldest roots. For too long, these groups have been marginalized, seen as outsiders even within their own country. But genetics shows they are among the most original Filipinos, carrying a legacy that stretches back to the dawn of humanity. The African DNA hidden in Filipinos tells us something extraordinary. The Philippines is not just a crossroads of Asia, but a bridge to the very beginnings of humanity. From the mountains of Luzon to the islands of Mindanao, from ancient seafarers to modern families, Filipino blood carries echoes of Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. It means that when a Filipino looks in the mirror, they are not just seeing an islander or an Asian. They are seeing a living map of the human journey, stretching from Africa to the Philippines and beyond. That's not just science, that's identity.